Let us pray. As Canadians and as Albertans, we give thanks for the precious gifts of freedom and peace which we enjoy. As members of this Legislative Assembly, we rededicate ourselves to the valued traditions of parliamentary democracy as a means of serving our province and our country. Amen.
Introduction of visitors. Reading and receiving petitions.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. I would like to present a petition, or I'd like to request that the petition I presented yesterday, Volunteer Corporation Act, be read and received.
We, the undersigned, request that the Assembly urge the government to establish a task force to call for and examine submissions regarding the effects of Bill 54 on non-profit organizations in this province. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to give oral notice of a motion pursuant to Standing Order 40. I'd like to present for unanimous consent at the end of question period pertaining to AIDS Awareness Week.
Introduction of bills.
Minister of Forestry.
Mr. Speaker, I request leave to introduce Bill number 7, the Tourism Education Council Act. This being a money bill, Her Honor, the Honorable the Lieutenant Governor, having been informed of the contents of this bill, recommends same to the Assembly. Mr. Speaker, this bill establishes the Alberta Tourism Education Council under its own legislation. The Council brings government, industry, and educators together to coordinate education and training opportunities for Alberta's tourism industry.
The Chair apologizes to the Minister for the wrong designation, but the Chair never claimed to be perfect anyway. The Honorable the Minister of Tourism has moved first reading of Bill number 7, Tourism Education Council Act. All those in favor of first reading, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. Carried.
Bill number 7, Tourism Education Council Act, introduced by Honorable Mr. Sparrow, is now read a first time.
Member for Redwater Andrew.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce Bill number 5, the Oil Sands Technology and Research Authority Amendment Act 1988. The purpose of it is basically to transfer monies from one fund to another.
The Honourable Member for Redwater Andrew has moved first reading of Bill number 5, Oil Sands Technology and Research Authority Amendment Act 1988. Those willing to give assent to first reading, please say aye. Opposed, please say no. So ordered.
Bill number 5, Oil Sands Technology and Research Authority Amendment Act 1988, introduced by Honorable Member Mr. Zaruski, is now read a first time.
Member for Cypress Redcliffe.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce Bill number 227, Motor Dealer Act.
The Honourable Member for Cypress Redcliffe has moved for first reading Bill 227, Motor Dealer Act. Those in favor of first reading, please say aye. Opposed, please say no. Motion carries.
Bill number 227, Motor Dealer Act, introduced by Honorable Member Mr. Highland, is now read a first time.
Member for Westlock Sturgeon, followed by Red Deer North.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce Bill 230 in an act to amend the Alberta Bill of Rights. This bill would provide all Albertans with the right to a healthy environment and to the protection of that environment. This bill also outlines the means by which Albertans may seek damages when those rights are violated, including the ability to sue the government.
The honourable member for Westlock Sturgeon has moved first reading of Bill 230, an act to amend the Alberta Bill of Rights. Those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Opposed, please say no. So ordered.
Bill number 230, an act to amend the Alberta Bill of Rights, introduced by the honourable member Mr. Taylor, is now read a first time.
Member for Red Deer North, followed by Edmonton Goldbar.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill, Bill number 6, being the Health Disciplines Amendment Act 1988. This bill deals with procedures to be followed by the registrar and with certain designations under the Act.
The honourable member for Red Deer North has moved first reading to Bill number 6, Health Disciplines Amendment Act 1988. Those in favour of first reading, please say aye. Opposed, please say no. Motion carries.
Bill number 6, Health Disciplines Amendment Act 1988, introduced by honourable member Mr. Day, is now read a first time.
Edmonton Goldbar.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce Bill 234, the Public Ambulance Act. This bill would establish effective ambulance services in the province. The Act deals with standards, licensing, funding, and overseeing body, a province-wide communication system, and ongoing training for ambulance personnel.
The honourable member for Edmonton Goldbar has moved first reading to Bill 234, Public Ambulance Act. Those members wishing to give consent to first reading, please say aye. Opposed, please say no. So ordered.
Bill number 234, Public Ambulance Act, introduced by honourable member Mrs. Hughes, is now read a first time.
Edmonton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce Bill 221, the Mental Health Protection Act. This comprehensive and progressive legislation is based on work done by the Uniform Law Conference to bring mental health statutes into conformity with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. In addition, the purposes of this act are to protect persons from dangerous behavior caused by mental disorder, to provide treatment for such persons, and to provide for them a patient advocacy service, and to provide for the return of patients to the community as soon as possible.
The honourable member for Edmonton Centre has moved first reading to Bill 221, Mental Health Protection Act. Those in favour of first reading, please say aye. Opposed, please say no. So ordered.
Bill number 221, Mental Health Protection Act, introduced by honourable member Mr. Roberts, is now read a first time.
House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that Bill number 5 and Bill number 6 be placed on the order paper for second reading under Government Bills and Orders.
Having heard the motion by the Government House Leader, those in favour, please say aye. Opposed, please say no. Carried.
Tabling returns and reports.
Pursuant to the Land Purchases Act, I am pleased to file with the Legislative Assembly statements of the Land Purchase Fund for the year ended March 31st, 1987.
I beg leave to table some reports required by statute, being the annual report of the Department of Education, the annual report of the Alberta Heritage Scholarship Fund, and the annual reports of Keano College, the University of Lethbridge, Grant MacEwan Community College, Grand Prairie Community College, and the Public Service Employee Relations Board.
Minister of Economic Development and Trade, followed by the Minister of Culture and Multiculturalism, followed by the member for Edmonton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to file with the Legislative Library the second edition of the Alberta Fashion Directory. A number of the companies that are featured in this directory are in Toronto this week, marketing their products that are manufactured in Alberta for all of the world to see.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table the annual report 1986-87 of the Alberta Foundation for the Literary Arts.
Member for Edmonton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, this being AIDS Awareness Week, I'd like to file with the Legislative Assembly copies of the report, AIDS in Alberta, the Official Opposition Response.
Introduction of special guests.
Speaker, on behalf of our colleague, the Honourable Neil Crawford, Minister of Special Projects and MLA for Park Allen, it's my pleasure today to welcome to the Legislative Assembly some 30 bright, vigorous, and enthusiastic young people from Grandview Heights School, grades 5 and 6. They're accompanied by 2 teachers, Lana Annie and B. Estabrook, and 1 parent, Dwight C. Love. Mr. Speaker, we're all delighted that these young people could visit the Legislative Assembly today, and while I know that they would have preferred that Mr. Crawford would have introduced them, I also know that they're sending their best wishes to Mr. Crawford during his period of convalescence. Mr. Speaker, I would ask our guests to rise, and I would ask that all members afford them our customary welcome.
Honourable Member for Chinook.
Mr. Speaker, today I have the pleasure of introducing to you and through you and to the members of the Legislative Assembly, Mr. Jack Butler of Chinook constituency. Mr. Butler served this legislature as MLA for the constituency of Hannah-Oyen from 1975 to 1979. I would ask Mr. Butler, seated in your gallery, Mr. Speaker, to please stand and receive the customary warm welcome of this assembly.
Member for Lethbridge West, followed by Edmonton Beverley, followed by Westlock Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, it's indeed a special day today and a privilege for me to introduce to you and to honourable members of the House a very special person in your gallery, Mr. Speaker. How well many of us remember that exciting night in 1972 when Hockey Team Canada beat the Russians. We have in your gallery, Mr. Speaker, and I would ask him to rise and be recognized by the House, Mr. Paul Henderson, who in the final minute of the game scored that great winning goal for Canada against Russia, and accompanying Mr. Henderson was Mr. Jerry Sherman of the Christian Embassy of Canada. Would both gentlemen please rise, please? In addition, Mr. Speaker, as well in your gallery, we have visitors from overseas who are visiting here at the University of Alberta. They are both journalists, Mr. and Mrs. Liu, who are from the People's Republic of China. They're visiting the University of Alberta and lecturing. They are accompanied by Dr. Jennifer Jay of the University of Alberta, as well as Dr. Charles Burton and Dr. Chen Yu Shi. I would ask all of these people in the gallery to rise and receive the customary warm welcome from the Legislative Assembly.
Pleasure for me this afternoon to introduce to you and to members of the Assembly 22 energetic grade 5 and grade 6 students from R.J. Scott Elementary School that's located in Edmonton Beverley. They're accompanied by their teacher, Linda Manson. I'd ask them to rise and receive the welcome of the legislature.
Mr. Speaker, Monsieur le Président, I have the pleasure to introduce to you and through you to the legislature 2 classes from Legal in the center of my constituency, the grade 6 class in English and also class, Mr. Speaker and French, j'aimerais-vous présenter les élèves de la 5e et 6e année de la section française de l'école de Legal. So, ici avec leur professeur, Madame Denise Sour. Also accompanying the classes are Mr. Eugene Krupa, another teacher, and a number of parents, Mr. Speaker. I beg your indulgence. After all, Westlock Sturgeon has not been represented by a Liberal for some time. So, Mr. Brenda Bouchard, Mrs. Sophia Stelmack, Mrs. Phyllis Gagne, Monsieur Bob Deost, Mr. Debbie Russell, Mrs. Debbie Russell, Mrs. Colette Bilodeau, Mr. Normand Farsad, Mrs. Lorraine Chouinard, Mr. Richard Morier, and Mrs. Donner Peltier. I would ask classes both in the public and in the members' gallery to stand and receive the warm welcome of this legislature.
Member for Dunvegan.
Mr. Speaker, gives me a pleasure to introduce to you and through you to 5 members of the Spirit River School Division located in the beautiful constituency of Dunvegan. They are Chairperson Karen Agee, Board Members Ann Hemingsway, Terry Kosobeck, Wilma Bird, Gail Sorensen. I would ask them to rise. They are seated in the public gallery and receive the customary warm welcome.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct the first question to the Minister for Economic Development. Mr. Speaker, this government obviously sees nothing wrong with tossing Albertans' money to its friends in terms of loan guarantees, Mr. Speaker, especially without any sort of guarantees that it will be creating jobs. Mr. Speaker, as the Minister of Economic Development said yesterday, about $67 million, he said about $67 million given to his friend Peter Pocklington, and I quote, "There is an undertaking to do both of these things that I have described to the members of the Assembly." Mr. Speaker, big deal. People in Alberta want more than an undertaking, Mr. Speaker. My question to the Minister, will the Minister guarantee, absolutely guarantee, the pork producers of Northern Alberta that this assistance to Mr. Pocklington is contingent on there being a hog slaughter facility and gainers in Edmonton in the years to come?
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition in his preamble indicated, and I think it should be only fair to the members of the Assembly that it be properly stated that this arrangement with gainers is not a gift. It's a financial arrangement where there's a loan guarantee, where there's a fee collected by the government, as well as a loan that commands an interest rate return. And so it is not a gift, Mr. Speaker. It is a financial arrangement.
Distortion.
I had indicated yesterday that the undertaking by the company was to upgrade the facilities in Edmonton that very effectively serve Northern Alberta, both for the processing of beef and for pork. As the honourable member is aware, there are very few meat packing plants in Northern Alberta. The majority are now in Southern Alberta. So it's vitally important that producers not have to pay the freight to move their animals to Southern Alberta. So yes, the undertaking is to upgrade the facility in Edmonton, as well as to build a processing plant in Southern Alberta.
Mr. Speaker, this is what bothers the people of Alberta, that word undertaking. And what I'm asking for, Mr. Speaker, is guarantees. There's a lot of taxpayers' money here. And my question is, will the minister absolutely guarantee that the hog producing will stay in Edmonton and that those jobs will be there in the years to come? Will he absolutely guarantee that with this amount of money that's gone through?
Mr. Speaker, as well, yesterday there was reference made to the agreement between gainers and the government with respect to the guarantee and the loan. And the agreement does include the undertaking by gainers to maintain the facilities in Edmonton and to upgrade them. The difficulty, Mr. Speaker, and you get into this when you're dealing with words, is guarantees. There could be one of the aspects I referred to yesterday was hog supply, the numbers of hogs in order to warrant new processing capability in Alberta, and that's critical to the plans of gainers and, Mr. Speaker, to Fletchers as well.
Mr. Speaker, what the minister is basically saying is that if there is hog supplies there, then we may have a guarantee. And the point that I want to ask this minister then is the minister saying that Mr. Pocklington can take this money, the $67 million, and do whatever he wants, that there is absolutely no guarantees on this. We hope that he will do something if there is hog supplies. Is that what the minister is saying?
Mr. Speaker, I thought I had explained the terms and conditions of the guarantee and the loan yesterday.
You had.
And the fact that they are secured by the existing properties of Gainers Limited. And also I had indicated the undertaking by the company to expand and upgrade the facilities in Edmonton, as well as a new plant in southern Alberta. It must be clear to all members that in order for a new plant to be viable, there must be the animals available to be processed, and that would be one of the conditions that would be necessary to be met.
Mr. Speaker, that's all well and dandy. I thought a free enterprise like Mr. Pocklington wouldn't need government money to do that. He would take his chances. But my question is, because the minister's brought it up, will he guarantee then to this assembly that the loan and loan guarantees that are secured by assets equal their full value and that Alberta taxpayers will not be paying any of Mr. Pocklington's debts in the future? Is there enough in those assets to cover that $67 million? Are we guaranteed that?
Mr. Speaker, yesterday there was a supplementary question by the member for Vermilion that was responded to by the provincial treasurer that responded precisely to that question.
Westlock Sturgeon, followed by Calgary McCall.
Mr. Speaker, a supplementary but to the Minister of Agriculture on this issue, Mr. Speaker, in view of the fact that the processor, Mr. Pocklington, is going to get the guarantee for the processing side. Has the Minister of Agriculture approached the Treasurer to work out a similar set of guarantees for those pork raisers that want to expand their facilities in order to raise pork to supply to this coming plant?
Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member is aware, and if he isn't, he should be, any negotiations as it relates to these types of agreements are confidential until they're announced, simply so that we do not have competitors intruding on traditional areas where they might be interested in. Yes, negotiations are taking place, but I'm not at liberty to indicate with who.
Calgary McCall, followed by Littlebow.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Economic Development and Trade, it is my understanding that the arrangements with Gainers for a loan guarantee is to give them the opportunity to create jobs and upgrade the facility in Edmonton and to build a facility in southern Alberta. Would it not then be true that the loan guarantee would not be required, at least to the full extent, if these two projects are not commenced, and then would therefore require the, when they are completed, that the government's risk would be at a minimum?
Mr. Speaker, the loan guarantee, as I'd indicated earlier, is fully secured by the existing assets of Gainers.
The member for, okay. Main question, second main question, Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to designate my second question to the member from Edmonton Mill Woods.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Advanced Education. Several years of inadequate funding of the province's universities have finally led the Board of Governors of the University of Calgary to take an unprecedented action. They've said enough is enough. They said that in order to maintain some semblance of educational quality, they are going to have to approve a deficit budget despite prohibitions to that effect under Section 28 of the Universities Act. In light of such an unprecedented action, can the Minister now admit the total adequacy of the government's funding policy and immediately advise a meeting with university officials to determine a more reasonable budget allocation for the universities of this province?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm glad the honourable member raised the matter because it gives me an opportunity to give the information to the House that Alberta ranks first of all provinces in Canada. Alberta ranks first with respect to all provinces in Canada per full-time equivalent student in our universities. And it also ranks first in Canada on per capita support for post-secondary education. I don't believe, are you able to stand on your feet, or do you just honk away like that from a sitting position out of habit? Oh, leadership, yeah, I see.
It's going to be a leader.
We're not about to allow an interesting new provocative procedure of ministers being able to ask the opposition questions. Perhaps we could go to the supplementary question.
Mr. Speaker, given that this government's policy has resulted in a reduction of 10% in the purchasing power of Alberta's post-secondary educational institutions, can the minister tell us what further actions do boards of governors of Alberta universities have to take to impress upon them the severity of the funding crisis?
Just in Canada.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there are several options open to the boards of governors, and I'm sure in his first question the honourable member didn't mean to mislead the House. The boards of governors, of course, can run a deficit budget if they present a fiscal plan to the government through the Minister of Advanced Education, and I'm waiting to receive such a plan and or request from the University of Calgary. So there's no defiance or breaking of the law there. They're simply following the procedure as is outlined. But to answer the supplementary question, the boards have several choices. They can cut expenditures, try living within their means like the rest of Albertans. They can start making some choices and cut extraneous people and or programs from their institutions. Oh, yeah. And, you know, the list goes on, but given the background of the rich level of support that is there for them, combined with the tuition fees that they have at their disposal, plus other supplementary fees, I'm confident that the boards will find a way to manage this year.
To cut 5 cabinet ministers and give the U of C the money.
Mr. Speaker, since Section 28 of the Universities Act is so clear that a liability must be approved by the minister, is the minister saying that he will now ensure that funds are found to pick up deficits of Alberta's universities this year?
Well, loan guarantee.
No, Mr. Speaker, and I think you've warned members during question period about seeking legal interpretations of various bills. But I think it's clear that the process is there for any board to submit a fiscal plan. The University of Alberta is presently borrowing money to pay for an early retirement program. It's a well thought out plan. And if the University of Calgary has a similar plan, we'll certainly look at it.
Mr. Speaker, can the minister stand in his place and tell the people of Alberta how he can possibly justify on behalf of his government that they can find millions to hand out to their friend Peter Pocklington while universities are going on a starvation diet?
Starvation diet.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the post-secondary institutions in this province are hardly getting by on a starvation diet when they rank first in Canada.
Member for Vermilion Viking, followed by Calgary Buffalo.
Yes, could the minister indicate where our province's universities rank in raising funds from their alumni, the private sector, or corporations in comparison to other universities and institutions in other provinces?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I hadn't even alluded to that source of enrichment funds. Of course, the Matching Endowment and Incentive Fund set up by this government has been an unqualified and unmatched Canadian success story. And I can't say it's the best because there's nothing else like it in Canada. And I haven't even mentioned the additional millions by way of scholarships and special funds and by way of research support that have gone to the universities through our Heritage Fund sources. So I really believe that the institutions in Alberta are in a very enviable fiscal position when you look at the Canadian scene.
Calgary, Buffalo, followed by Little Bow.
Thank you. A supplementary to the minister. Both the University of Alberta and the University of Calgary have implemented policies capping enrollment this year. Is it the government's policy that the right of qualified Alberta students to get a university education should be limited in this way? And if not, why isn't the government ensuring that adequate spaces are available to qualified Alberta students?
Well, perhaps the honourable member missed that part of the throne speech when we made reference to that particular potential problem in northern Alberta by way of providing additional spaces for university transfer courses at Grant MacEwan College.
Member for Little Bow.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the minister and it's with regards to the equity study that has taken place in 1987. Could the minister indicate whether the recommendations of that study have been carried out, specifically the one with regards to the University of Lethbridge?
Yes, they have, Mr. Speaker. They were the last quarter of the present fiscal year contained some adjustment funds to conform with Dr. Dupre's recommendations, and the coming budget will see that those adjustments have been built in. There is special work going on with respect to the University of Lethbridge because their problems are quite severe, and the department is working on a regular and ongoing basis with the administration of that university to make sure that they're off on a good solid foundation again.
Member for West Loch Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, my first question today is to the Minister of Environment. In view of the administrative mix-up or mess that seems to be developing on the Daishawa project in the Peace River, particular permits, and I quote the minister's comment yesterday where he said, "We've received no applications for permits or licenses under the Clean Air Act or the Clean Water Act." Could he explain why Peace River papers are, or would he, I'm sure, explain not only why Peace River papers are calling for contractors now for Daishawa to strip over 700 acres of land just north of the town? Does the minister intend stopping that, or has the permit just come in the last few hours?
Mr. Speaker, this is now the third day in a row in which certain questions have been asked with respect to Daishawa, and yesterday I had an opportunity to provide some information with respect to the background of this project. I'd be absolutely delighted to provide more today, but I think it's kind of difficult to handle in the normal way of the question period. So I would seek unanimous approval of the House to give me the time to respond fully and completely to the question raised by the Leader of the Liberal Party.
Mr. Speaker, for somebody who has the record for more words per minute than anybody else in the House, I don't know why he needs more time. But maybe let's...
Well, the chair is thrust in a very peculiar situation. I assume that we're going to, is the minister about to cite Standing Order 40 or something, an emergency debate that we can have lengthy? I think we'll just have to continue in the normal flow of the question period, that the minister will have to respond as best he can and as fully as he can until he gets interrupted by the chair to reply to the first question, Mr. Minister.
I'll be governed by your decision, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, when I was providing some of the background with respect to this particular matter, I think that I noticed in the corner of my eye, Mr. Speaker, that you were rising, so I had to give deference to you. And at that point in time, I was indicating that to this point in time, no applications for permits or licenses under the Clean Air Act or the Clean Water Act had been received. What I had not had an opportunity to say, however, is that Daishawa Canada Limited had received a development permit number 88-2201, from Improvement District 22 on February 22, 1988. Now, Improvement District number 22, of course, is the local government territory, an area within which Dayashawa Canada Limited will be proceeding with this particular project. That permit was issued following public advertisement on February 14 and following a 14-day appeal period, which is required by the Planning Act, a statute of the province of Alberta. There were no appeals filed for this decision, so the Improvement District, the local government, didn't have a development appeal hearing, and that development permit contained a number of conditions, including permission for Alberta Environment and from Alberta Environment for certain activities to take place. As a result of that, Mr. Speaker, shortly thereafter, during that time frame, Alberta Environment received permit applications from DIBRA pursuant to the Water Resources Act on February 12, 1988, and by way of permit number 1813 from Alberta Environment, and by interim license number 15568, both issued on March 11, 1988, Dayashawa was given certain permissions to undertake some certain land clearing.
Mr. Speaker, in other words, the minister didn't know what the heck he was talking about yesterday. Then.
Respect, honourable member. Honourable member. Order, please. Yesterday, we went through a point of order about trying to speed up the process of question period so all members could get in, and there's at least 2 members of your own caucus want to get in. Could we go just straight to the supplementary, please?
Mr. Speaker, it's funny interpretation. He just talked for 5 minutes. All right then, Mr. Speaker. This is a peculiar department indeed, apparently a toothless tiger then. Has Dayashawa put up any form of damage deposit in point of view of the fact that they have not got their final permit yet? Have they put up any form of damage deposit in case the procedure is reversed and they have to put 700 acres of land back into function again?
Mr. Speaker, yesterday I responded in part to a question from the Leader of the Liberal Party giving some of the background with respect to this matter. Those comments are now within Hansard. Today, I provided some additional information with respect to part of the approval process that is being followed by Dayashawa Canada Limited. There is absolutely nothing different with respect to this particular process that is being followed by Dayashawa. It has been followed by any individual in the province of Alberta or any company or corporation in the province of Alberta. And there's an interim basis in which certain activities are being pursued with. I also indicated yesterday that we saw no difficulty at all in terms of the application process being followed by Dayashawa, and in any kind of process dealing with a $500 million investment in the province of Alberta, there will always be some time requirements that will have to be followed, some various questions. There's nothing absolutely out of the ordinary with respect to this. And the process is going along with no burps or hoops and hollows. The only confusion that seems to exist with respect to this matter, Mr. Speaker, seems to be in the mind of the member from West Loch Sturgeon.
Here's supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, if I could only get 10% of the time that the minister would have, I'd be happy.
Thank you, honourable member. Let's proceed with the supplementary question.
Ask any more questions, Mr. Speaker? Okay, all right. Okay. Mr. Speaker, and your pal here, the minister tell me, or could the minister tell the House or file to the House the so-called deficiency letter that he claims to have sent out to Dayashawa? In other words, the deficiency letter of things that were not accomplished or things were not sufficient when the original letter was filed. Will you file that deficiency letter with the House?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure what the honourable member means by deficiency letter. We've had, through 1987 and continuing to this point in time, ongoing discussions with Dayashawa Canada Limited that are no different than the discussions being held with any proponent in the province of Alberta seeking licenses or approvals from Alberta Environment. Certain information is provided, certain questions are asked. Certain answers are provided, other questions are asked. This is an ongoing process, absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. We will continue to ask questions until we're absolutely satisfied that everything is being met to our conclusion. And no licenses will be approved or provided until all answers have been provided to us in terms of the questions that we're asking of.
Mr. Speaker, I would refer the minister to read his own press release by his own environment spokesman, Janet Austin, who talks about deficiencies. Mr. Speaker, may I address the last supplemental? I believe it's my last supplemental. I've lost count with the diarrhea of words that have hit me in the last while. But could I ask the minister, or could I ask the premier, whether or not Dashaw has informed them that they will be taking a walk unless the Lubicon native question is solved in the next few months?
No, Mr. Speaker.
Edmonton Glengarry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could the minister, as an act of prudence on behalf of the people of Northern Alberta, give a guarantee that he will have back dioxin results for the tests he has been withholding for months, or the samples he's been holding for months, before he issues any permits under the Clean Air and Clean Water Act?
Mr. Speaker, we are withholding no information. I made that abundantly clear yesterday, Mr. Speaker. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, the samples in question are available for public view. If the member from Edmonton Glengarry would like to come with me, I'll take him, I'll walk him across the street to the Alberta Environment offices, I'll show him 24 bottles of water that he can look at. I'll extend that same invitation to any citizen in the province of Alberta through the public media to come and take a look at the samples. Now, Mr. Speaker, when we haven't received, Mr. Speaker, a conclusive response, I will make that information available. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. I responded to that yesterday, Mr. Speaker, in terms of...
Honourable Minister, please don't respond to the back chant. Member for Little Bow, followed by the member for Lloydminster.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Labour.
Follow the rules.
Listen
to you whining all the time.
School dispute in the north central east section of this province is not being settled. Could the minister indicate what steps have been taken by the minister's office or the minister to give some advice in that strike so that the students can get back to school?
Mr. Speaker, for some time there have been mediators from the department involved in that dispute. They have given some advice, as indeed have I.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question to the minister. Is the minister considering the next possible step of ordering the teachers back to work so the schools can be opened?
Mr. Speaker, there has been some consideration given to that, but the difficulty is that the two parties have got so close in the process of negotiating that it would seem a little inopportune to have to use provisions of that strength under the current circumstances.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question to the minister. The minister has indicated the two parties are close at this point in time. Does that mean the negotiations are continuing? My understanding is that the two parties are not prepared to meet each other. If they're not prepared, is the minister taking some steps to get them together?
Yes, indeed, Mr. Speaker. The situation is that both parties have agreed that the end point of a 32-month contract should be at 5.5% increase on the current grid. They are currently about 0.4% apart on the total cost over the period of the 32-month agreement, and the department personnel were indeed in contact with both parties this morning, encouraging them to get back to the table.
Mr. Speaker, final supplementary to the Minister of Education is with regards to the grade 12 students themselves. Could the minister indicate whether the correspondence school facilities have been made available? I believe they are. And are the students have they been provided special attention by correspondence school staff so that these students can be up to date with other grade 12 students in the province?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I can indicate that correspondence courses are being made available now for grades 1 to 12 students in the strike area, with particular priority and certainly in starting into the correspondence on the grade 12 students, recognizing the very difficult effect that a prolonged strike of this nature can have on their education, particularly within the semester system. I can say that I'm getting very fed up with the length of time that it's taking for both parties to resolve this dispute and to call upon both of them to settle the dispute so that the students can have the access to education that they deserve.
Member for St. Albert.
Supplementary to the Minister of Labour. One of the issues that created the nurses' strike was a lack of funding in hospitals and medical care. Is the same problem to the Minister? My question to the Minister is this: is the same problem evident in this teacher strike? Is there a lack of funding there so that the boards can't bargain in a meaningful way with those teachers? Is that what's causing the problem?
Mr. Speaker, I think it will be a little difficult to say that with a difference of 0.4% that is indeed the problem. The problem appears to be that those negotiating on behalf of the employers and the county councils and those negotiating on behalf of the teachers, the ATA, have forgotten their legal and professional responsibilities to the students involved.
Member for Calgary-Buffalo, followed by Redwater Andrew.
To the Minister of Education, Mr. Speaker, in 1984 the government started an equity funding program for particularly for rural schools, which is only halfway completed and would cost an estimated $13 to $15 million to complete. I'm wondering why the minister doesn't proceed to complete that funding program so that rural school boards can afford to pay a reasonable wage to their teachers as opposed to the third lowest wage level in the whole province of Alberta, as is the situation for the teachers who are involved in that particular strike at this point of time.
Mr. Speaker, I'll attempt to answer the three questions that were part of the member's question. First of all, the question of equity and the meeting of the equity needs across this province is not restricted to rural areas. In fact, there is an inequity in terms of the manner in which a school board may supplement what the province gives to all students in this province. As the honourable member knows, this government took a leadership role in the fall of 1987 by putting out a paper which discussed the various ways in which we might better meet the equity needs now that the principle of equity has been embodied in the School Act. How we will respond as the government to that, to those various proposals, the honourable member for Calgary-Buffalo will just have to wait until we table the new School Act during this spring session. With respect to the effect of wages, or the effect on wages in various parts of the province, I would remind the honourable member, and I'm particularly reminded of the point of view he has taken frequently in this House with respect to the role of school boards, that it is school boards in this province who negotiate with their teachers, school boards who reach what they believe is a fair rate of pay for their teachers, and it is in no way affected, in my view, by a change in funding, because I think we need only look, with respect to the member for St. Albert's question, we need only look at strikes which, thank goodness, have not occurred frequently in this province, and look at times when they have occurred even when grants have been increased.
For Redwater Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, the questions to the Minister of Labour, and since this strike does affect part of the Redwater Andrew constituency, I'd like to ask the Minister if he's made any attempt to have any meetings with some of the groups involved to help settle this long overdue strike.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I have met with two groups at their request. One group from Smoky Lake and Thorhild and another group from the eastern end of the area around St. Paul. Both groups asked for the meeting, and in both cases they got it within 24 hours. I have not had any request for a meeting from the teachers.
Member for Lloydminster, followed by Edmonton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, AIDS is a deadly disease that all Albertans are concerned about. And I would ask the Minister of Community and Occupational Health if he would tell the House what are the objectives of the AIDS Awareness Week.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I joined with a number of community groups on Friday last to officially announce and officially proclaim this week to be AIDS Awareness Week. I joined with AIDS Calgary and AIDS Network of Edmonton to announce an AIDS Awareness Week, the first one of its kind in this province, the first one of its kind in this country. And the purpose of the week, Mr. Speaker, is to promote and give visibility to those efforts of our government, to those efforts of those community groups working cooperatively to put an end to this fatal disease.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. What is the government doing to support the community groups to counteract this disease?
Mr. Speaker, we announced our program last October, and the theme of the program is that of education and caring. And we're taking that approach. We're taking the non-medical approach, but instead we're taking the health promotion approach, because a medical approach won't work in this case. Once an Albertan gets AIDS, that's it, and it's too late. So by working with community groups, providing them with funding, we provided $130,000 this year to each of AIDS Calgary and AIDS Network of Edmonton to assist them in their counseling and their information and education programs. And other groups in Grand Prairie, Red Deer, and Lethbridge are beginning, and we'll work with those groups, and we've made a commitment to those groups to fund them.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. When are you going to announce the appointment of a provincial AIDS coordinator?
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, in our efforts to coordinate this three-year, $6.5 million program, the only one of its kind in magnitude in this country, we want to appoint a coordinator who can a professional who can assist us to work with those community groups, to work with health professionals, to work with teachers and students and their parents, to work in putting together proper work practices to prevent those employees who are exposed to the highest risk, to work with them and make this program a success. And we expect to announce the appointment of that person within the next couple of weeks.
Final supplementary. How do we compare with the other provinces, Mr. Minister?
Well, Mr. Speaker, on a per capita basis, there is not another province that equals our $6.5 million three-year commitment to combat this deadly disease.
Edmonton Centre, followed by Edmonton Gold Bar.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Hospitals and Medical Care, could he please tell the Assembly what studies his department has done to assess the impact that the over 10,000 Albertans who are estimated to be HIV carriers, what impact if they come up with full-blown AIDS in the next 5 years, what impact that will have on the hospitals and medical care system of this province?
Mr. Speaker, we have taken the approach that the Minister of Community and Occupational Health would have the major responsibility for coordinating our government's actions in response to the problems created by the AIDS disease. I've worked closely with him and with other caregivers to determine the nature of services that might be provided by the active treatment hospital system and by the auxiliary and nursing home hospital system. In due course, Mr. Speaker, I would hope we would be able to make further comment on what we expect to have to do in order to accommodate those needs. At the present time, there's still a lot of uncertainty with regard to the numbers that we might be looking at in future years, but we're certainly prepared to move quickly when the need arises.
Edmonton Gold Bar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since it's sometimes rather difficult to know exactly who's in charge, I'll address my supplementary to the Premier. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Premier, can you tell us, please, Mr. Premier, what are the government's plans or active proposals regarding the provision of appropriate residential and treatment services, including palliative care, to those Albertans who are suffering from AIDS?
Mr. Speaker, it's an excellent question that could well be discussed during estimates of the Minister of Community and Occupational Health, because it takes some considerable detail.
Member for Edmonton Centre, followed by Edmonton Gold Bar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Hospitals and Medical Care, during the nurses' strike, a couple of hundred bedside nurses were asked how many would encourage their own daughters and sons to go into nursing, and 5 put up their hands. And yet last year during the budget debate, when government members opposite were asked how many would approve the 7% cuts to hospital budgets last year, everyone stood up and said yes, they'd approve those cuts. Will the Minister of Hospitals and Medical Care now admit that it was his arbitrary cuts of last year which so seriously exacerbated this dissatisfaction among nurses, and will he take his share of the responsibility for the frustration and low morale that exists among the bedside nurses of this province?
Mr. Speaker, we have without question one of the best medical care systems in the country in our province, and the funding level on a per capita basis or any other measure that the honourable member would wish to use is more adequate than any other province in Canada. We're confident that the funding that's provided to the hospital system can provide adequate compensation to nurses and other healthcare professionals that work in the system. For the honourable member to suggest that a lack of funding is cause for great concern with respect to the benefits received by nurses or their working condition, I don't think is totally accurate. There are certainly other areas of concerns that have been expressed to me by nurses that have very little to do with funding, that have to do with their place in the whole healthcare system and the manner in which they contribute their knowledge as caregivers to the system. I think it's those kinds of things that the Heinemann Commission is going to be exploring and hopefully coming up with some recommendations for our government and for hospital boards that will be helpful in years to come.
Well, it's nice to have more taxpayers' dollars going to fund that Tory think tank, but the minister has allowed the funding to increase to hospitals, and they've gone into costs for hospital construction, for higher-priced drugs, for higher-priced medical technology. Can the minister tell Albertans why he has allowed the deterioration in the support for those who are delivering the hands-on bedside nursing care 24 hours a day? They're not getting the support.
Well, Mr. Speaker, all of us are aware of the NDP's stated position of not building any facilities in rural Alberta.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear to that.
We will continue with the answer to the question.
Repeat it.
Am I given to understand that that position has now changed?
They have no position.
Mr. Speaker, the last time that I checked, the nurses and the caregivers in 128 different parts of this province where active treatment hospitals were located wanted to have good facilities. And just because we have made substantial progress in that area, in fact very good progress over the last 10 or 12 years, doesn't mean that we should not continue. The capital costs of facilities that are currently under construction or planned are a very small part of the overall budget of the Department of Hospitals and Medical Care, and I don't think we should suddenly stop providing services in some communities that need them very, very badly, simply to put that money into the operating budget of the department so that it can expand services that hospitals provide through operating dollars. Now, it may well be that the honourable member has some suggestions that could be helpful for us, and I'd appreciate them during the budget debate.
I thought it was the minister's own recommendation that he reduce the number of beds per 1,000 that we have in this province. But on a very specific point, in being building rich and program poor, we know that in hospitals, however well they're built, that most patients die between the hours of 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. in the morning. Does the minister agree with the Alberta Hospital Association's position that 2 relatively well-staffed units during the day should become 1 understaffed unit during the night and other shifts?
Mr. Speaker, I'm continually amazed by the honourable member's suggestion that we shouldn't be putting any capital dollars into hospitals. At Christmas time, the Honourable Premier and I announced the rebuilding and refurbishing of the Royal Alexander Hospital in Edmonton. The honourable member wants to stand in his place and suggest that should not be done. We have under consideration at the moment some major upgrading of the W.W. Cross Cancer Centre here in Edmonton. We have under consideration some improvements to the Children's Hospital in Calgary, all kinds of projects that are badly needed. Let the member stand up and state what the NDP position is on the provision of medical services in this province.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In answering the minister's question to the honourable member, I'd like to point out what the NDP's position is on this matter. And
the member gives a very interesting example of the concern that the chair has, that we're back to supplementary questions, but we're roaring around with 2 and 3 answers or comments before asking the question. Could we have the question, please?
will the Minister of Hospitals and Medical Care please outline his position to this Assembly and to all Albertans with respect to the nursing staff levels on shifts other than day shifts, where during the evening and night shifts, particularly, for instance, most people in hospitals die, where nurses are understaffed, where they are vulnerable, both patients and staff, to low staff.
Honourable member, perhaps both of us are having a little difficulty suffering from an occupational hazard known as preacher's disease. Please.
Mr. Speaker, the system in our province, as I would be pleased to point out to the honourable member again this year during the budget estimates, is that the Department of Hospitals and Medical Care provides global operating dollars to each individual hospital board across the province. It then is the responsibility of those hospital boards to determine how they expend those dollars and determine levels of staffing. I don't believe there's any one criteria that would fit every hospital, indeed perhaps not even 2 or 3 hospitals in our province. There are a lot of factors that need to be taken into consideration if the member would care to speak to a hospital administrator. A lot of factors.
Honourable Minister, I hesitate to interrupt, but time for question period has expired. Might we have unanimous consent of the House to complete this series of questions? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Supplementary question, Calgary Glenmore, followed by Edmonton Gold Bar.
Mr. Speaker, in regards to the member's first question, I believe that nursing is still a popular advanced education.
Honourable member, I realize that there's a difficulty following on this tradition in the House, but perhaps you could go straight to the question.
To the Minister of Advanced Education, would the Minister please indicate the enrollment in the nursing profession in the schools in Alberta?
Well, no. I'll have to get that information and report back.
Member for Edmonton. Edmonton Gold Bar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My supplementary is to the original question to the Minister. Will the Minister tell me now if he intends to support my motion to revoke the legislation that took away from nurses their right to strike?
Mr. Speaker, the answer from my own personal point of view is no, I would not support that. I believe very strongly that the provision of medical services to our citizens is so important that it should not be interrupted by strike activity by anyone. I also believe that if there is a better way to resolve labour disputes than what is currently outlined in our legislation, I, for one, am perfectly willing to sit down and listen to it. And perhaps we can make some changes that will be beneficial. But as far as saying that the citizens of our province should not have medical care because strikes are in progress, I simply don't agree with that.
Great.
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture wishes to supplement information given earlier in question period in response to a question by the member for West Loch Sturgeon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I misinterpreted the question that was put by the Honourable Member for West Loch Sturgeon, in that I was under the impression he was seeking information as it related to packing plants or further processing rather than direct support for the farming population. And I'm happy to report to the Honourable Member, as it relates to the farming population, we have programs in place to backstop credit needs for our agricultural sector or our farmers to the tune of excess of some $3 billion. I'm happy to report that to the Honourable Member.
Member for West Loch Sturgeon on a supplementary to which the Minister may respond.
Mr. Minister, All I want to know, Mr. Speaker, all the House would like to know, and all the farmers of Alberta would like to know, Mr. Speaker, is what specific programs of loan guarantees for pork producers who want to expand their pork production to make the Minister of Economic Affairs look good, what specific programs do you have in place?
Mr. Speaker, I hope you'll allow me the opportunity to respond fully to them. Number one, we have our Alberta Farm Credit Stability Program, which is a $2 billion program which the farmers who are involved in the pork industry can apply to. They can receive that money at 9%. It's a $2 billion program. In addition, we have the Agricultural Development Corporation, which has loans out in excess of $1 billion presently. In the speech from the throne, we also announced a further program as it relates to the further processing and the sale of our agricultural products within this province. In addition, we have the Alberta Processing and Marketing Agreement. We have a number of programs that are very beneficial to our agricultural sector, and to support that, if one looks at the increase in hog numbers over the last number of years because of programs such as the Crow Offset Program and numerous other programs, we have had an increase of hog production in the province of Alberta, and we want to make sure that we have the processing facilities so that we can take advantage of that further value-added product.
Orders of the day. Member for Edmonton Centre, with respect to Standing Order 40.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move the